Chapter 1. The Midnight Call. The rain hammered against the windows with the force of a mallet, echoing through the sleeping city. In his small office, Detective Jack Malone slept on a pile of reports, his dreams invaded by shadows and whispers of unsolved cases. The shrill sound of the telephone shattered the early morning calm, dragging him back to reality. He rubbed his eyes, reached for the receiver, and answered with a grunt. Malone. His voice was hoarse, laden with fatigue. "Detective Malone, this is Alfred, the butler at Blackwood Mansion. We need your help. Evelyn is missing." The voice on the other end was tinged with desperation, each word trembling like the flames of a candle about to be extinguished. Jack straightened in his chair, sleep evaporating quickly. "Evelyn Blackwood? The heiress?" he asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it to believe. "Yes, sir. She disappeared tonight." "Please, come immediately," Alfred implored. Wasting no time, Jack threw a coat over his shoulders and headed for the door, his mind already working on the possible reasons for the disappearance. Evelyn Blackwood, the beautiful and young heiress to the vast Blackwood fortune, was a well-known figure in the city's social circles. Always elegant, always smiling, but there was something in her eyes that Jack had noticed the few times he saw her. A shadow of sadness, as if she bore an invisible burden. The rain continued to fall, relentless, as Jack drove through the deserted streets to the mansion. Blackwood Mansion loomed majestic, a Gothic structure surrounded by ancient trees and shadows that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. Alfred, an elderly man, with an erect posture and tired eyes, waited at the door. "Detective, thank you for coming so quickly," Alfred said, opening the door for Jack to enter. The mansion was as imposing inside as it was outside, with its wide corridors, antique furniture, and portraits of the Blackwood ancestors hanging on the walls, silently observing. "Let's start from the beginning, Alfred. Tell me everything you know," Jack requested, lighting a cigarette as he followed the butler to the library. "Miss Evelyn was last seen in her room at 11 o'clock at night. When I checked later, the door was open, and she was not there. There are no signs of a struggle, but I found this note." Alfred handed a crumpled piece of paper to Jack. Jack read the note, where words were hastily scribbled. "If you want to see Evelyn again, stay out of this. The police won't help." He frowned. "This doesn't look like a common kidnapping. And the other family members?" "They are in the living room, waiting for you," Alfred replied, the concern evident in his voice. In the living room, Jack met Robert Blackwood, the family patriarch, a man of imposing presence, gray hair, and a stern look. Next to him was Victoria, the stepmother, a woman of icy beauty and rigid expression, and Nathan, Evelyn's half-brother, a rebellious young man, with eyes full of resentment. "Detective Malone," Robert began, his voice deep and controlled, "I hope you can find my daughter quickly. I'll do my best, Mr. Blackwood, but I need to know everything. Is there anyone who holds a grudge against you?" "Any recent threats?" Jack inquired, observing each one's reactions closely. Victoria was the first to respond, her voice cold as marble. "We all receive threats from time to time, but nothing that seemed serious." "Did anyone see or hear anything unusual tonight?" Jack asked, turning his gaze to Nathan, who looked away. "I was in the city with friends," Nathan replied, a hint of defiance in his voice. "I just got back now. We better start looking for clues," Jack said, addressing Alfred. "Show me Evelyn's room." As they climbed the stairs, Jack felt that the mansion had a life of its own, each shadow and sound seemingly laden with secrets waiting to be uncovered. In Evelyn's room, he examined everything meticulously, searching for any clue that might have been left behind. The bed was unmade, but there were no signs of a struggle. The window was open, letting in the cold wind and rain. Jack closed his eyes, trying to imagine what could have happened. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, he murmured to himself, and it's not going to be easy to find the truth. Jack knew that this case would be different from all the others. There was something in the darkness of that night that told him he was about to enter a labyrinth of lies and dangers. And at the center of that labyrinth was the truth about Evelyn Blackwood's disappearance. Chapter 2. The Mansion. Shrouded in shadows, dawn brought little light to Blackwood Mansion, surrounded by a dense fog that seemed to swallow everything around. Jack Malone, a seasoned and experienced detective, felt the weight of the place's history. Every wall seemed to whisper ancient secrets. Each corridor concealed shadows that danced under the dim light of chandeliers. "So, Alfred, show me where it all started," said Jack, as they walked through the silent corridors. Alfred, the family's loyal butler for decades, led Jack to Evelyn's room. "Here, sir. This is Miss Evelyn's room. It was here that she was last seen." Jack entered the room, his sharp eyes scanning every corner. The room was surprisingly tidy, except for the unmade bed and the open window, allowing the cold wind to stir the white lace curtains. There was a palpable sense of urgency in the air, as if the room itself was aware of its owner's disappearance. "Was the window like this when you found it?" Jack asked, pointing to the open window. "Yes, sir. I haven't touched anything since then," Alfred replied, standing by the door. Jack approached the window, observing the garden below. The ground was muddy from the rain, but there were no visible footprints. Someone could have come in and out through here, but with this rain, it'd expect to see marks. As Jack pondered the possibilities, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Victoria, Evelyn's stepmother, with her cold and calculating gaze. "Detective Malone, do you need anything? Can I assist in any way?" Jack looked at her, assessing. "I will need to speak with all the family members. I'll start with you, Mrs. Blackwood. Can you tell me about your evening?" Victoria maintained her rigid posture, her face impenetrable. "I was in the music room, as I am every night. I played the piano until about 11 o'clock. I didn't hear anything unusual." Jack noted the lack of emotion in her voice, but decided not to press her for now. "And after 11? Did you do anything different?" "I went to my room. I only learned of Evelyn's disappearance when Alfred woke me," she replied, with a slight tremor in her voice. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. Please, ask your son, Nathan, to come here," Jack said, dismissing her. Nathan, the rebellious half-brother, entered the room with a slouched walk, his eyes tired and full of disdain. "What do you want, detective? I already told you I was in the city with friends. Let's make this official, Nathan." "Where exactly were you, and with whom?" Jack asked, his penetrating gaze fixed on the young man. "I was at Charlie's bar with some friends. I left there around 2 in the morning. "Anyone can confirm that," Nathan replied, crossing his arms. "Any of these friends have a reason to hurt Evelyn?" Jack asked, trying to read between the lines of Nathan's expression. Nathan scoffed. "Look, Evelyn is insufferable sometimes, but no one I know would do something like this. Besides, she was planning to run away, you know." Tired of all this family pressure, Jack noted this information. "Very well, Nathan. You may go. If you remember anything else, let me know." With the initial interviews concluded, Jack knew he would need more than just words to unravel this mystery. Each member of the Blackwood family had something to hide, and he was determined to discover what it was. As he walked through the mansion's corridors, Jack felt the pressure of those watching, from the portraits of ancestors hanging on the walls to the shadows that seemed to follow his steps. There was more to that mansion than anyone was willing to admit. He found Alfred again, near the library. I will need full access to all the rooms. This mansion is a labyrinth, but I have a feeling the key to finding Evelyn is hidden somewhere here. Of course, sir. I will ensure that all doors are open for you, Alfred replied with a respectful nod. As night fell once again over Blackwood Mansion, Jack knew that time was against him. Every passing minute was crucial, and he would need all his skill and experience to solve this case before it was too late. The mansion was shrouded in shadows, and Jack was determined to bring the light of truth to every dark corner of that place. Chapter 3. Portraits of a Broken Family. The first light of dawn barely penetrated the thick fog enveloping Blackwood Mansion. Jack Malone was in his makeshift office in the library, surrounded by files and notes about the family. With each page, more questions arose, and he knew that to understand the present, he needed to unravel the Blackwoods' past. The clock struck 7 in the morning when Robert Blackwood entered the library. He looked exhausted, his eyes heavy from a sleepless night. "Detective Malone, any news about my daughter?" His voice was deep, marked by a despair he tried to hide. Jack looked up from the documents. "I'm still piecing things together, Mr. Blackwood, but I need to understand more about your family. There might be something that can help," Robert sighed, sitting in a leather armchair. "Our family has always been complicated. My father built this empire, and I inherited the responsibility. Evelyn is my only blood daughter, and she's always been a sensitive soul. Victoria and Nathan, well, I can't say our relationship is easy." Jack made a mental note of Robert's hesitation when talking about the stepmother and half-brother. "I need to speak with each of them again. I'll start with Nathan." Nathan was called to the library. He entered with the same disdain as before, but there was something more in his eyes, a shadow of fear. "Again, detective? I've already told you everything I know. Let's recap, Nathan." "Tell me about your relationship with Evelyn," Jack asked, lighting a cigarette and watching the young man carefully. Nathan shrugged. "She was always Daddy's little princess. We never got along. She thought I was a rebel without a cause, and maybe I am. But it never hurt her if that's what you're implying. You mentioned she wanted to run away." "Any idea why she felt that way?" Jack asked, blowing a cloud of smoke. Nathan hesitated. She hated this place, all the pressure, the expectations. And also, there was something about the stepmother. Evelyn never trusted Victoria. Jack felt he was getting closer to something. Why didn't she trust Victoria? Nathan shifted in his chair. "I think Evelyn knew something. Something Victoria was hiding. But she never told me what." Jack thanked Nathan and dismissed him. The next person to be interviewed was Victoria. She entered the library with an air of haughtiness, her cold gaze fixed on Jack. "Mrs. Blackwood, we need to discuss your relationship with Evelyn," said Jack, without preamble. Victoria sat elegantly, crossing her legs. "My relationship with Evelyn has always been cordial. I tried to be a good stepmother, but she never accepted me. Always saw me as an intruder." Jack leaned forward, his gaze steady on hers. "Nathan mentioned that Evelyn didn't trust you. Why?" Victoria kept her expression unperturbed. "Evelyn was a troubled girl, always looking for enemies where there were none. Perhaps she didn't accept someone else coming into her father's life." Jack noted her response, but felt there was more hidden beneath that icy facade. "And you, Mrs. Blackwood, do you have anything to hide? Any reason to want Evelyn out of the way?" "Absolutely not, Detective," Victoria replied, her voice cold and controlled. "I only want her found safely." With Victoria dismissed, Jack turned his attention to Robert. The patriarch was more vulnerable than before, a shadow of the powerful man he should be. "Robert, Did your daughter trust you? Robert ran a hand over his face, his eyes weary. I did my best, detective. But maybe it wasn't enough. Evelyn. She was everything to me. If something happens to her. Jack placed a comforting hand on Robert's shoulder. Well, do everything to bring her back. With the interviews concluded, Jack felt that the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but something crucial was still missing. Evelyn was somewhere, and each member of that family had a secret that could help find her. He needed more information and was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As the mansion remained shrouded in its shadows, Jack knew he was about to unearth secrets that could change everything. And in this game of lies and distrust, he needed to stay one step ahead. The truth was there, hidden in the shadows of Blackwood Mansion, waiting to be revealed. Chapter 4. The Library's Secret. The storm continued to batter the mansion, raindrops drumming against the window panes, as Jack Malone ran his fingers along the spines of the books in the Blackwood Library. Each volume seemed older than the last, smelling of mold and ancient secrets. There was something here. He could feel it. Something Evelyn might have discovered that someone wanted to keep hidden. Alfred, the butler, stood by silently, observing. "This library holds many secrets, Mr. Malone," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "The Blackwood family has always been diligent in keeping certain things away from prying eyes." Jack stopped in front of a particularly imposing bookshelf, decorated with golden ornaments. Was there any book here that Evelyn used to read? Something that could give us a clue? Alfred hesitated for a moment. She spent a lot of time here, especially in recent months. There was a diary, I believe. She found it hidden among the older volumes. "A diary?" Jack asked, his curiosity piqued. "Do you know where it is now?" "Unfortunately, no. It disappeared along with her," Alfred replied, worry evident on his face. Jack felt he was close to something important. With Alfred's help, he began to search the shelves, looking for any sign of a secret passage or hidden compartment. After several minutes of intense searching, he heard a click. One of the bookshelves moved slightly, revealing a small opening in the wall. "This is it," Jack murmured, pushing the shelf aside. Behind it, there was an old door, the iron rusted with age. Jack used all his strength to open the door, which creaked loudly, as if protesting the intrusion. Inside, he found a small room, lit only by a single hanging lamp. The walls were lined with documents, old letters, and black and white photographs. In the center was a wooden table with a leather-bound diary, clearly the one Alfred had mentioned. Jack picked up the diary and began to leaf through it. The pages were filled with Evelyn's notes, some dating back years. There were entries about her father, about the stepmother, and more recently, about a forbidden romance with Marco, the young gardener. But something else caught Jack's attention. On several pages, there were mentions of an invisible threat, a figure in the shadows watching her. Evelyn mentioned someone who was stalking her, Jack said aloud, more to himself than to Alfred. She knew she was in danger. Alfred approached, shock evident on his face. This is worse than I imagined. She never talked about this to me." Jack continued reading. There was a recent entry describing a heated argument between Evelyn and Victoria, the stepmother. Evelyn had found evidence that Victoria was embezzling money from the family and threatened to expose the truth. The next page was stained, as if tears had fallen on it, but the words were clear. "If something happens to me, look in the library." Jack closed the diary and looked at Alfred. "This confirms my suspicions. Victoria had motives to want Evelyn out of the way." "Sir, what do we do now?" Alfred asked, his voice trembling. "We need to talk to Marco." He might know more than he's saying, Jack decided, putting the diary into his coat pocket. And we need to confront Victoria. She knows more than she's letting on. As they left the secret room, Jack couldn't shake the growing weight in his chest. The plot was thickening, and each step brought him closer to a truth that promised to be devastating. In the shadowy mansion, the Blackwood family's secrets were beginning to emerge, and with them, danger. The next step would be crucial. Facing Victoria and discovering how far she was willing to go to protect her secrets could be the key to saving Evelyn. Jack knew he had to be careful, for in a game of lies and betrayals, any wrong move could be fatal. Walking through the dark corridors, Jack mentally prepared himself for the confrontation ahead. The truth was there, lurking, waiting to be unearthed, and he was determined to reveal it, no matter the cost. Chapter 5. The Target of Romance. Blackwood Mansion was quieter than ever, the tension in the air almost palpable. Jack Malone walked through the gardens, Evelyn's diary words echoing in his mind. He needed to talk to Marco, the young gardener. If anyone knew more about what was happening with Evelyn, it was him. Marco was pruning the roses, his expression focused, oblivious to the chaos surrounding the family he worked for. When he saw Jack approaching, his eyes widened, a mix of fear and anxiety evident on his face. "Marco, I need to talk to you," said Jack, stopping a few steps away. "It's about Evelyn." Marco put down the pruning shears and wiped his hands on his pants. "Detective, I already told you everything I know." "I don't believe that, Marco. Evelyn mentioned you several times in her diary." "She trusted you," Jack insisted, his eyes fixed on the young man. "Tell me about your relationship, and why she was so afraid." Marco sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Yes, we were together, but no one could know. She loved me, and I loved her, but there was so much pressure, so much fear, especially from Victoria." "Victoria knew about you?" Jack asked, leaning forward slightly, his voice low and urgent. "Yes," Marco admitted, his face pale. "She found out a few weeks ago. Evelyn found proof that Victoria was stealing money from the family and threatened to tell her father. Victoria saw us together and used it to threaten Evelyn. She said if Evelyn said anything, she would destroy both of us." "That explains a lot," Jack murmured, thoughtful. "Evelyn mentioned a figure in the shadows. Do you know anything about that?" Marco hesitated, fear evident in his eyes. "Yes. Evelyn said she was being followed. She didn't know by whom, but she felt she was always being watched. Once, we thought we saw someone in the gardens at night, but we couldn't identify them." Jack noted this information. The situation was becoming clearer, but there were still many unanswered questions. "Marco, do you know where Evelyn might be hiding? Someplace where she would feel safe." Marco thought for a moment. "There's a cottage on the property. Evelyn used to go there when she wanted to be alone. It's a place few people know about." "Thank you, Marco." "This could be very useful," said Jack, giving the young man a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Stay close. I may need more information." With this new lead, Jack returned to the mansion, determined to confront Victoria. He found her in the music room, playing the piano with cold and meticulous skill. The music seemed to reflect the tension that permeated the atmosphere. "Mrs. Blackwood," began Jack, interrupting the somber melody. "We need to talk. Now." Victoria looked at him, her blue eyes icy. "What do you want, detective?" "I've already told you everything I know." "No, you haven't. I know about you and Evelyn. I know she found evidence against you and that you threatened her. And I know about her relationship with Marco," said Jack, crossing his arms. "It's time to tell the truth." For a moment, Victoria's cold mask seemed to crack. She slowly stood up from the piano, her posture still haughty, but there was something vulnerable in her gaze. Everything I did was to protect my family. Robert would never understand. He lives in the past, stuck in traditions. I did what was necessary to ensure the future. Evelyn was willing to destroy you to protect her family, Jack said firmly. And now she's missing. What really happened, Victoria? Victoria took a deep breath, her eyes shining with a mix of anger and fear. I threatened her. Yes, but I didn't hurt her. I just wanted her to leave me alone. The night she disappeared, I heard noises, but I thought it was her running away, as she always talked about doing. You're hiding something else, Victoria. Something crucial, insisted Jack, taking a step forward. And I will find out what it is. Victoria looked away, her expression hardening again. I don't know anything else, Detective. You're wasting your time. Jack knew he had hit a nerve, but he also knew Victoria wouldn't give in easily. He needed more evidence, something that could confront her definitively. And the cottage mentioned by Marco seemed to be the next logical step. As Jack prepared to head to the cottage, the tension in Blackwood Mansion was rising. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but time was running out. Evelyn was somewhere, and Jack was determined to find her before it was too late. The truth was getting closer, hidden among the mansion's shadows and its inhabitants' secrets. And Jack knew that, to uncover it, he would need all his cunning and determination. The search for Evelyn was just beginning, and the detective was ready to face any obstacle in his way. Chapter 6. False Leads and Broken Alibis. The rain fell incessantly as Jack Malone walked towards the cottage, the small structure hidden among the dense trees surrounding the Blackwood property. Each step was calculated, every sound amplified by the growing tension. He knew he was getting closer to the truth, but he also knew that each discovery brought new questions. The cottage was modest, a weathered stone building covered in ivy. Jack pushed open the door, which groaned in protest, revealing a simple, yet cozy, interior. The room was empty, but there were signs of recent occupancy: a half-full teacup, a folded blanket on the sofa, and an open book on the table. Jack approached the book, reading the title, Jane Eyre. Evelyn liked classics, he thought. As he examined the room, Jack heard a soft noise from upstairs. He climbed the wooden stairs cautiously, his hand firm on the gun in his holster. In the bedroom, he found the window open, the curtains fluttering in the wind. Something was wrong. He approached slowly, looking outside, but saw no one. Suddenly, the sound of quick footsteps behind him made him turn, but the room was empty. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had been there but had escaped just in time. He searched the room, finding a piece of paper pinned under the bed. It was a letter written by Evelyn, her words filled with fear and uncertainty. Dear Marco, if you find this letter, it means I'm in great danger. Don't trust anyone at the mansion. They are all against us. I love you forever, Evelyn. Jack pocketed the letter. Evelyn was running from someone, but who? And where was she now? He descended the stairs, his mind working quickly. He needed to return to the mansion and re-examine everything. Upon returning to the mansion, Jack found Alfred in the library. Alfred, I need your help. We found something at the cottage, but I need more information. Someone might have seen or heard something that night. I understand, sir. I'll do my best to help, said Alfred, his loyalty evident in his voice. Jack gathered everyone in the living room again. Robert, Victoria, and Nathan were there, their faces a mix of fatigue and distrust. You all have something to hide, began Jack, his gaze sweeping the room. Evelyn knew something that threatened each of you. Robert raised his head, his voice grave. What did you find, Detective? A letter from Evelyn. She was running from someone here. Someone who was threatening her, said Jack, pulling the letter from his pocket and holding it up for all to see. Victoria was the first to speak, her voice cold. This proves nothing. Evelyn was paranoid, always imagining threats where there were none. She mentioned you specifically, Victoria. And you, Nathan. You knew more than you were saying. Evelyn found proof against both of you. And you, Robert. Why didn't you mention the family's financial troubles? Evelyn was trying to save you all. Nathan stood up abruptly, his eyes flashing with anger. You don't know anything, Detective. Evelyn was destroying our family with her madness. She wanted to run away, yes, but just to make us suffer. Jack remained calm, his gaze steady. And what did you do to stop her, Nathan? Did you follow her? Threaten her? Nathan seemed about to respond, but Victoria intervened, her voice cutting. Enough. Evelyn was out of control. All we did was try to protect her, even if she couldn't see that. Robert looked at Jack, his expression defeated. Please, Detective, bring my daughter back. Jack felt the pressure of Robert's words. He knew the truth was there, hidden among the family's lies and secrets, and he was determined to unearth it. That night, Jack reviewed all the evidence and clues. There was something he was missing, something that didn't make sense yet. As the shadows lengthened in the mansion, he knew he needed to be smarter than fate itself to find Evelyn. And so, the search continued, each step closer to the truth, each revelation more dangerous than the last. Jack Malone was ready to face any obstacle because he knew Evelyn's life depended on it. And he would not rest until she was safe, and the truth finally revealed. Chapter 7. The butler's confession night fell over Blackwood Mansion, shrouding it in almost impenetrable darkness. Jack Malone felt the weight of every shadow and the tension in the air. As he walked through the silent corridors, his mind was filled with thoughts. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but he knew that a crucial part of the story was still missing. Jack found Alfred in the entrance hall, the butler meticulously cleaning a chandelier. Alfred, I need to talk to you. Let's go to the library, said Jack, gesturing for the butler to follow him. Alfred nodded, setting the cloth aside and following Jack. In the library, Jack closed the door behind them and looked directly at Alfred. Alfred, you've been here for decades. You know this family better than anyone. It's time to tell me what you really know. The butler seemed to hesitate, but then sighed deeply, as if he had carried a burden for too long. Detective Malone, there is something I need to confess. I know more about Evelyn's disappearance than I let on. Jack stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the butler. Go on, Alfred. What do you know? The night Evelyn disappeared, I heard an argument in the hallway. I went to investigate and saw a hooded figure leaving her room. I couldn't see the face, but I followed the figure to the library. It was there that I heard a click, like a mechanism being triggered, began Alfred, his voice trembling slightly. What happened next? Jack asked, his curiosity and urgency mounting. The figure disappeared, but I knew something was wrong. I waited until everyone was asleep and went to investigate. That's when I discovered the secret passage in the library. I entered the hidden room and found Evelyn's letter. I should have told you immediately, but I was afraid, Alfred confessed, shame evident on his face. Jack frowned. Afraid of what, Alfred? Afraid that the truth would destroy this family. But now I see that hiding, it only made things worse. Evelyn was in danger, and I didn't do enough to protect her, said Alfred, his voice filled with regret. Jack took a deep breath, trying to process the new information. Alfred, this is crucial. Whoever took Evelyn knew about the secret passage. We need to find out who else knows this secret. Alfred nodded, seeming relieved to finally share his burden. "I'll help in any way I can, Detective. Evelyn's life is at stake." Jack knew he had little time. He needed to gather all the family members and confront them with the new information. "Let's gather everyone in the living room. It's time to confront this family with the truth." Shortly afterward, Robert, Victoria, and Nathan were assembled in the living room, their expressions ranging from exasperation to distrust. Jack positioned himself in the center of the room, with Alfred by his side. "I have new information about Evelyn's disappearance." Alfred saw a hooded figure leaving her room the night she disappeared, and followed them to the library, where they disappeared into a secret passage, Jack announced, watching their reactions closely. Victoria maintained her cold expression, but there was a glint of something in her eyes. Nathan looked at the floor, clearly uncomfortable, while Robert appeared genuinely confused. "A secret passage? This is ridiculous," Victoria said, her voice dripping with forced incredulity. "It's not ridiculous, Mrs. Blackwood, and we know that Evelyn was being threatened. She found evidence against you and Nathan. So the question is, who among you had the most to gain from her disappearance?" Jack asked, crossing his arms. Nathan stood up abruptly, anger evident on his face. "I already told you I didn't do anything. I don't know about any secret passage." Jack turned to Robert, who was visibly shaken. "Robert, do you know about this passage?" Robert slowly shook his head. No, I didn't know anything about this." Jack then turned to Victoria. "And you, Victoria? It's time to confess." Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but was interrupted by Alfred. It was her. "I saw Victoria entering the library that night, after the hooded figure disappeared." Victoria's eyes widened, her mask of coldness finally breaking. "I just wanted to protect my family. Evelyn was about to destroy everything. But I didn't do anything to hurt her, I swear." Jack knew that Alfred's confession was the final piece of the puzzle. "Victoria, you may not have done it directly, but your actions led Evelyn to flee. Now we need to find her before it's too late." With the truth finally revealed, Jack felt he was close to finding Evelyn. The mansion still held many secrets, but he was determined to uncover them all. Each step brought him closer to the truth, and he would not rest until he brought Evelyn back safely. The last piece of the puzzle was within reach, and Jack Malone was ready to face any challenge to solve this case. Chapter 8. The Confrontation at the Mansion. The tension in Blackwood Mansion was palpable. Jack Malone, now armed with new revelations, knew he needed a careful strategy to handle what was to come. He gathered the family in the grand living room, where the air felt heavier than ever. Each family member sat in silence, waiting for Jack to speak. "The time has come for the truth," Jack began, looking at each of them. "Alfred saw Victoria that night, and we know Evelyn was fleeing from a threat within her own home. Victoria, your actions led to this. But I don't believe you acted alone." Victoria, who had previously maintained an aloof posture, now appeared vulnerable. "I did what I thought was necessary to protect the family," she said, her voice breaking. "But I never wanted it to come to this." Jack turned to Nathan. "Did you know about the threats, Nathan? Did you help your stepmother?" Nathan shook his head vigorously, fear evident in his eyes. "No, Detective. I was angry at Evelyn, but I'd never hurt her. I tried to warn my father about Victoria, but he never listened to me." Robert, sitting with his head bowed, finally raised his gaze. "Why didn't you tell me, Nathan? Why did none of you trust me?" Jack knew the full truth was close. He needed a clear confession to close the case. "Victoria, you wanted to protect your position in the family. But who actually executed the plan? Who is the hooded figure Alfred saw? Victoria looked at the floor, tears streaming down her face. It was the gardener, Marco. He was desperate to protect Evelyn and planned her escape. I discovered this and tried to use it to my advantage, but things got out of control. Jack felt a mix of relief and concern. Marco could be the key to finding Evelyn, but he was also a suspect. Where is Marco now? Alfred, standing beside Jack, responded. He should be in the greenhouse. I can take you there. Jack nodded. Let's talk to him. The greenhouse was shrouded in serene twilight, contrasting with the mansion's tension. Marco was tending to the plants, but quickly looked up when he saw Jack and Alfred approaching. Marco, we need to talk, said Jack firmly. I've already told you everything I know, replied Marco, nervousness evident in his voice. Victoria confessed, said Jack, watching Marco's reaction. We know you helped Evelyn escape. Now we need to know where she is. Marco took a deep breath, as if deciding what to do. Finally, he spoke. I took her to the cottage, as I said, but after that, she decided to hide in an even safer place, a place where no one would easily find her. And where is that place? Jack asked, trying to stay calm. Marco hesitated before answering. It's a cabin in the forest, beyond the property limits. It was our secret hideout, a place where we dreamed of starting a new life together. Jack knew he had to act quickly. Take me there, Marco. We don't have time to lose. As they walked through the forest, the darkness seemed to close in around them. The cabin finally came into view, a small and discreet structure. Jack approached cautiously, his hand on his holstered gun. Evelyn, Marco called, his voice trembling. It's safe now. You can come out. The cabin door opened slowly, and Evelyn appeared, pale and frightened, but alive. Marco, Jack, what's going on? Jack sighed in relief. Evelyn, it's okay now. We're here to take you home. Evelyn ran into Marco's arms, tears of relief streaming down her face. I thought I'd never see you again, she said, sobbing. Let's get out of here, said Jack, looking around to ensure there were no more threats. There's still much to clarify, but the important thing is that you're safe now. As they returned to the mansion, Jack knew the case was far from over. There were still consequences to face and secrets to uncover. But for now, Evelyn was safe, and that was what mattered. In the grand living room, Robert, Victoria, and Nathan waited anxiously. When they saw Evelyn enter, a wave of relief washed over them. Robert ran to embrace his daughter, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Jack, Robert said, his voice choked with emotion. You saved my daughter. My work isn't finished yet, Jack replied, observing the reunited family. But yes, Evelyn is safe. Now we need to ensure everyone involved faces justice, and that these dark secrets never threaten anyone's safety again. The truth had been revealed, but the path to redemption and justice was still long. Blackwood Mansion, with all its secrets, had finally begun to unveil its shadows, and Jack Malone was determined to see it through to the end. Chapter 9. The Final Revelation. Morning arrived wrapped in a pale glow, dispelling the shadows of the previous night. Blackwood Mansion, though still haunted by its secrets, seemed lighter, as if Evelyn's presence had brought a glimmer of hope back to the place. Jack Malone knew the battle was not entirely won, but the main mysteries had been solved, and now it was time to deal with the consequences. In the living room, Evelyn was surrounded by her family. Robert held her hand tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again. Victoria, standing at a distance, looked more humble, her usual coldness replaced by an expression of regret. Nathan sat, still confused and resentful, but relieved to see his half-sister back. Jack positioned himself in the center of the room, drawing everyone's attention. "Evelyn, we need to clarify everything so we can move forward. Can you tell us exactly what happened the night you disappeared?" Evelyn took a deep breath and began to speak. "I was in my room when I heard someone outside. I thought it was Nathan or Victoria, so I hid. That's when I saw a hooded figure enter. I knew I was in danger, so I ran to the library. Marco had already prepared everything for my escape, so I used the secret passage and went to the cottage." She looked at Victoria, her eyes filled with pain. "I knew you were involved, Victoria. You always hated me. When I found out what you were doing, I knew my life was in danger." Victoria lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to protect my position in the family. I thought that if you told your father, everything would fall apart. But I never wanted it to go this far. I was scared." Robert, still holding Evelyn's hand, looked at Victoria with a mix of anger and sadness. "Why, Victoria? We could have resolved this together. But you chose the path of lies and betrayal." Nathan, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. "Evelyn, I'm sorry for not being a better brother. I was so angry and resentful that I didn't see what was really happening." Evelyn looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. "Nathan, I wasn't fair to you either. We both made mistakes, but we still have time to fix this." Jack, seeing the family beginning to reconcile, knew his job was almost complete. But there was one last thing to do. "Marco, you were essential in saving Evelyn, but we need to clarify your role in all of this." Marco, who had been waiting outside, was called in. He looked nervous, but determined. "I loved Evelyn and would do anything to protect her. When she told me about the threats, I planned the escape. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted us to be safe." Jack nodded. "I understand. You helped Evelyn, and for that, we are all grateful. But your actions will have consequences. You will be investigated, and if found guilty of any crime, you will face justice." Marco lowered his head, accepting his fate. "I will do whatever it takes to pay for what I did. I just want Evelyn to be safe." With that, Jack felt he had fulfilled his duty. He looked at the Blackwood family, reunited and beginning to heal their wounds. "My part in this case is almost done. The truth has been revealed, and now it's time for all of you to start rebuilding." Robert stood up and shook Jack's hand. "Thank you, Detective Malone. You brought my daughter back and revealed the truth. We can never thank you enough." Jack just gave a slight smile. "It's part of my job. Take good care of her, Robert, and all of you. Remember that the truth, no matter how painful, is always the best path." As Jack prepared to leave the mansion, he looked one last time at the Blackwoods, knowing his work there had made a difference. The shadows that had enveloped the mansion were beginning to dissipate, replaced by a new beginning. The truth had prevailed, and Jack Malone was ready for the next case, knowing that wherever darkness hid, he would be there to bring the light of justice. Blackwood Mansion had been a challenge, but he had proven once again that the truth always finds its way, even in the deepest shadows.